Hello, everyone, and thank you for being a part of ODTUG's online educational webinar series. Today, we will have a presentation from our friends at Alithia titled, Wait, I didn't know EDM could do that, and presented by Kevin Black. If you have any questions that you would like to present to Kevin during the presentation, please submit them to the Q&A question box that you have on your screen. And the recording of today's webinar will be available for all individual and corporate members online after the presentation. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you. And welcome everybody. So I will go ahead and share my screen. So just a brief mention of the agenda. So I'll do a very quick introduction, I promise, about Alithia and myself. And then for anybody that's on this webinar that maybe isn't quite as familiar with EDM, I'll just give some brief background about the capabilities, benefits, and use cases of EDM. And then we'll kind of dive into the main content. And really the idea of this was kind of born out of me noticing clients were using EDM, using it effectively, but maybe not always realizing there's a lot more that it can do, often beyond the traditional financial chart of accounts management. So that's kind of the impetus for this session. I did present this at Kscope, so this is very similar. I tried to streamline it a bit because I ran long at Kscope. I didn't have enough time for Q&A. So hopefully we'll have enough time for that. So please put your questions in the Q&A box as we go. Just a brief mention about Alithia for those that don't know us. We actually got our start back in the 90s, really, with Ranzel, and then later Edgewater Technology or Edgewater Ranzel. And then a few years ago, we were acquired by Alithia, who is a consulting firm headquartered in Canada. And Alithia as a whole has a Microsoft practice, an Oracle practice, and some other digital consulting practices. But as far as the Oracle practice, you can see the numbers here. Pretty much all of the key leadership from the original Ranzel and Edgewater days are still with Alithia. So you can see we have a lot of experience, a lot of projects, and we also have 8 Oracle ACEs as part of Alithia, which is something we're proud of. But really the key is, we kind of deal with both the EPM side of Oracle Cloud as well as the ERP side, including financials, HCM, and SCM. We also have a variety of advisory services, and I'll actually touch on that a little bit in one of the use cases I'll talk about in a few minutes, and also a managed services organization for those clients that need some additional support in managing their EPM environments. The last thing I'll point out here is that we not only implement Oracle, but we run our shop on Oracle. So we are a user of Oracle ERP, Oracle EPM, and HCM. Quick note about myself. So I'm a product director at Alithia. I've been here, I guess 10 and a half years, coming up on 11 years. Before that, I was at a client company, and that's where I first got my um, work or exposure to Hyperion at the time. I am an Oracle ACE professional. We've done many implementations since EDM was first released back in 2018. In fact, we were a beta test partner for Oracle and EDM, as well as one of the original early adopter implementation partners. So I have a full team. We have a lot of experience of doing EDM, and that's pretty much all we do. We still dabble a little bit with some DRM projects on the side, but we are primarily 99% of the time focused on EDM. All right, so for those that are not as familiar with EDM, just some quick background information. I like to start here because sometimes people are a little bit confused over what does EDM really do, and they see the term data management, and they may think that EDM is somehow managing transactional data or financial data, and that is not the case. Really, the emphasis is on enterprise data or the enterprise data assets that every organization has. So you think about your chart of accounts, your legal entities, your GL accounts, your departments or cost centers. That's what EDM manages. And it really does that in some unique ways that to me really set EDM apart from many of the other master data tools that I've worked with. It really out of the box offers a full data governance framework. All changes to your hierarchies are request driven. And then you can layer on approval workflows or policies on top of those to provide additional enrichment and controls before anything is actually committed and changed in your chart of accounts. EDM is definitely designed for the business user in kind of a collaborative and self-service approach. So it's meant to be very interactive. It allows you to kind of work with your team to apply changes and collaborate on updating your hierarchies and really do a lot of things in a self-service mode instead of putting in a ticket to IT or waiting for somebody else to push a button. You can do a lot of those activities inside EDM itself. It comes with a lot of integration and automation capabilities. There are several out-of-the-box adapters that come with EDM for specific target applications. There's a lot of other automation that we can do within EDM to really automate the routine and to make the management of your hierarchies and all the properties and attributes very streamlined. And then I'll talk about the use cases in a minute here, but the what if analysis is also important. EDM really allows you to not only maintain your business in a day-to-day fashion, but also to do some what if analysis if you're going through some transformational business event.
Hi, Kevin. I hate to interrupt you, but we're not being able to see your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Um, Shows that I'm sharing. Hmm.
That's
Yeah, now it froze on me.
okay.
I'm
Oh, we
sorry.
had it and then we lost it.
No, it was almost there.
Okay.
How about that? Do you see? It looks like it's switching monitors on me. Do you see a PowerPoint or kind of a Windows background?
A PowerPoint.
Okay, good. Sorry about that.
Not in presentation mode, but a PowerPoint.
Yeah, yeah, I'll put it back in presentation mode.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It was showing that I was shared, but I guess it didn't really do it. All right,
Oh,
so
thank you.
thanks for mentioning that before I continue to ramble on. This was all of that I had really showed besides the agenda. So again, just some of the capabilities of EDM. And then if we translate those into the benefits, I kind of categorize those in four ways. One is this, again, the flexibility is a strength of EDM to not only manage those day-to-day routine activities to maintain your master data, but also to handle some of the less frequent but more significant transformational events like a chart of account redesign or a merger or acquisition or some kind of an enterprise reorganization. Accuracy obviously is critical to any master data tool, and we have implemented EDM in many places, establishing it as a system of record for both EPM and ERP environments. Data first is something that's a bit unique with EDM, especially compared to other master data tools, even like DRM that I've worked with in the past, where instead of trying to centralize and force conformity to all of the downstream applications, EDM is really built upon the fact that every target application is different. Every target application will have unique requirements in terms of alternate hierarchies and attribution and level of grain. And EDM has kind of a decentralized approach to provide each target application with exactly the detail that they need to support their functions. But at the same time, we can also centralize the administration of hierarchies so that you're not making the same change multiple times. And then finally, the transparency. EDM offers an audit history. It's an always-on function that tracks every change that was ever recorded inside EDM as far as what was changed, who did it, when did they do it. And then Oracle has actually expanded the audit capabilities to not only include the transaction history, but even changes to system configurations, approval workflows, and other artifacts of EDM that is also completely audited and searchable and able to be downloaded to Excel if you needed to look at it offline. So hopefully that provides a very brief but high-level view of really where EDM fits in. So again, it's not a tool to manage transactional or financial data. It is a tool to manage your enterprise data assets. As far as use cases, I've kind of touched on this already. I'll go pretty quickly here, but again, obviously run the business is a key one. Companies need the ability to maintain their master data or their chart of accounts in a very streamlined and easy to use fashion. And EDM can certainly do that for more of the routine day-to-day activities. But again, it can handle those less common activities. So if there is a chart of account redesign or a ground to cloud conversion or a major acquisition, EDM can support that with what if modeling and analysis while it in parallel can support the day-to-day running of the business. And then finally, the governance. On top of all of this, EDM provides out-of-the-box governance, which can be augmented through additional workflows and other controls and validations to really provide that right level of control and visibility and transparency into what is changing in your hierarchies. Okay, so let's get to the meat of it. So the first example I wanted to go through was kind of using EDM for mapping purposes, which maybe doesn't seem that surprising or exciting, but it can really be used in a lot of different ways to support mapping. So I'll try to convey that in the next few slides. So a few key background or considerations to keep in mind as we go through this. One common misconception is that EDM can really only manage mappings for Oracle products. Now, obviously, that is the sweet spot for EDM based on how the adapters and the functionality works, but EDM can do it for non-Oracle and on-premise legacy systems, and it's something we do pretty regularly. So just keep in mind that EDM can really manage mappings beyond the Oracle ecosystem. As far as output, there's kind of two primary mechanisms of EDM. There's kind of a built-in export mapping function, which I'll talk about in a minute, that can produce mappings in a very simple source target format, most commonly used for sending mappings to data exchange or what used to be known as cloud data management. And then we also have extracts, which provide the ultimate amount of flexibility to produce mappings in different formats. And that's where it's really useful when you start to branch beyond the traditional Oracle EPM mapping use cases, is the ability for extracts to produce mappings in various formats for consumption by different target systems. As far as the destinations, EDM has a concept of global connections that these extracts can use, where we can send mappings directly to the data exchange or the data management inbox. We can send it to the UCM of ERP Cloud. We can send it to an object storage bucket or to an SFTP site. Where we're starting to see more use, particularly with the UCM and object storage, is where mappings are being used or lookups or mapping sets of some type are being used for either Oracle Accounting Hub or Accounting Foundation. So we have the ability to send mapping sets to UCM for consumption by Accounting Hub or to an object storage bucket for consumption and pickup by Accounting Foundation Cloud Service. And then just a side note, this has been out a few months now. This was, I think, released over the summer, but there's always been a question about how can I kind of connect EDM to an Oracle database like I used to do all the time with DRM. And there is now a recipe for that. So I put the link in here. If you want more information on this, please reach out. But it is essentially an OIC recipe to either export or import EDM data from an Oracle database leveraging OIC. So that link is really a full recipe, step-by-step process on how to make that work. As far as approaches, and I have some screenshots to give you some better examples of this, but really there's a lot of ways to tackle mappings in EDM. You can do it obviously through hierarchies, parent-child relationships, for example, to kind of generate your source and target mappings. You can create purpose-built mapping viewpoints, or kind of map bindings is what they are called inside EDM, is kind of a special purpose parent-child relationship to produce mappings. And then, of course, you can always use properties, and you can do a lot of slick things with EDM in terms of derived properties. You can leverage inheritance. You can associate a property to a node in a different dimension member, things of that nature. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you want to structure the mapping source inside EDM based on the use case. You can also use EDM for different types of mapping. So it's not just for the explicit one-to-one or many-to-one mappings, although that is most common. But there are ways to configure EDM to support more ranges or wildcard types of mappings, and then even multi-dimensional. And I'll talk about the multi-dim in a little bit. The next point I just wanted to bring up, because I often work with clients who have concerns where they really want to leverage EDM more for mappings, but they are concerned about the impact on the licensing, the record count licensing that most clients have. So there is some relief. This came out a little while ago, but I'm not sure if everybody realizes it's out there, but there is a specialty node type class called a legacy GL node type. And you are able now to use this special class node type to define kind of your legacy source mappings inside EDM. And the records that are in that node type do not count towards your overall record count. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then some other things that I'm seeing more recent trends in using EDM in terms of related value sets and code combination sets and cross-validation rules. So kind of stepping through each of those previous points in a little more detail. This is just some examples. Again, a lot of this is from my demo environment, but it kind of shows you, you can have a very basic hierarchy on the left here that was really set up as part of a map binding. And then using this built-in export mapping function that's available in EDM, it's different than the dimension export. It's a mapping export. It will produce a file somewhat like this in the upper right. It's basically a source target file that could be pushed out to something like data management. So this is just an example of going into a dimension, setting up the map binding. You can set up location names and do some other things, but it's a very simple way to produce mappings out of EDM. It's a technique that I use often when I have to do, I would say, simpler but many to one mapping examples, like many legacy accounts mapping to one enterprise account. The mapping viewpoint is a good option for that situation. But you can do properties and extracts. So if I go to the next screen, here's another example where, again, I have a hierarchy, but I'm really able to produce extracts out of EDM in different formats from the same source inside EDM. So this is an example of, again, I could do something like a map binding, the export mapping to produce this example, but then I could also create a extract in EDM that would produce a mapping of this type. And this specific example is one that I'm doing at a client right now where they need mappings for Accounting Hub in this very specific Oracle provided template called an XLA mappings import template. So it's kind of an interesting template. It's kind of a zip file with a CSV file inside it that has all kinds of columns. So really from the same viewpoint in EDM, I could multi-purpose extracts out of that viewpoint to create different formats for different target systems. And then getting into some of the properties I mentioned. So this is useful just when you need a bit more flexibility. Like if there isn't an obvious parent-child or a many-to-one relationship, you need something a bit more refined or maybe that has a bit more logic behind it. What we often do is leverage either derived properties or use the node data type property. So the node data type essentially lets you associate a member of a hierarchy to a member of a different dimension, as this example here. So this is a way of mapping this specific entity to a business segment that lives in another hierarchy. It's nice in that it kind of forces you to select a valid member as the target because it's actually going to bring up a selector window where you navigate into that related hierarchy and pick the member you want to associate it to. The derived properties, again, are just useful if you need to do a little bit more of a complex logic. You need to maybe go up a few levels of the hierarchy to get an ancestor value, or maybe calculate something based on some ancestors or siblings or some other condition. So anything like that, a derived property is the way to go. And you can basically store that property, attach it to the member name itself, and then create any kind of extract out of that for the mapping out of EDM. This is a pretty simple example, but it's just to clarify that again, you can do more than just the explicit mapping. So, I mean, it takes a little bit of setup. But I used to do things like this in my DRM days. You could do it with EDM as well. But you could set up explicit mappings, like this example here, ignore mappings, or even kind of like or wildcard or range mappings. This is a pretty basic example. If you wanted to get more sophisticated, you could even set up multiple node types within this dimension and have a node type that kind of requires specific properties to be filled in based on the type of mapping that you are doing. I've seen that used more often with multi-dim mappings, which I'll get to next. But if you really want to get a little more sophisticated and precise in exactly what the user sees, you can go the multi-node type route within a given dimension or mapping viewpoint to really control exactly what is needed to support that mapping type. And really, for the most part, when you're dealing with this kind of mapping or anything around, leveraging node data type properties or just custom derived properties, you'll typically be using extracts to produce mappings out of EDM. The mapping export function is really only relevant when you do that map binding, that mapping viewpoint approach on the earlier screenshot that I showed. Okay, multi-dim. This is always an interesting topic. I have done this. I'm doing it at a client today. Um, I guess my key message is that it is doable, but it may not be easy. It really depends on how many uh, segment values or segments are included in the multi-dim mapping, and how many exceptions are there to those mappings, and are there some conditions that you can kind of latch onto to maybe automate the maintenance of some of those mappings. So it gets into a lot of the same things that I've already talked about. You can leverage multiple node types. You can do different mechanisms to capture the mapping type through different node types. You can do properties, node data types or derived properties. And then you often need to really understand the expression builder in EDM because often you'll find yourself needing to get into some of the advanced expressions. You might be doing some joins or splits or matches, those types of things. So I would just say it is doable, but proceed with caution because it could be complicated. Um, some of the multi-dims I've done have been maybe, just a couple of segments concatenated together. I am working on some that's a bit more complex where it's like six or seven. So um, for those use cases, what I have found to be really useful is this calculated store on the node name, on the core.name property, because you'll find, at least I'm finding with this other client, that there's five, six, seven source values that concatenated together equate to a specific target value. But you can't just key off one of those five or six segment values as your source record. It's really a concatenation, a combination of all those that really drive the uniqueness. So what I found to work well is you can now do the updating of those properties directly in EDM, either through an interactive request or a request file, and then use the calculate and store feature on the core.name and let it kind of append or concatenate that all together. And that basically generates your unique key to store that record or that member name in EDM. So I guess again, that's my takeaway. It's doable, but it can get tricky. I have had some other clients where they really wanted a complete crosswalk, like they were going from a seven segment chart of accounts to a 10 segment chart of accounts, and they needed to map every combination of the seven to every combination of the 10. And we ended up doing that through kind of a different solution outside of EDM. So, I would just kind of weigh the benefit, the effort to do this in EDM. Don't sell EDM short. It has a lot of capabilities, but again, you want to just think about what is the effort? Are there going to be lots of exceptions? What is the maintenance and the user experience going to be for the user inside EDM to maintain these before you go too far down this path? Okay, legacy node types, I kind of already talked about it, but it is a specialty node type. Records that belong to this node type do not count towards your licensing, which is great, but there are restrictions. So just keep in mind that it is somewhat locked down. So it does come with a lot of predefined properties, and I have a screenshot in the next slide to show you. So it does come with properties like account type and start and end date and enabled flag. So it gives you a good starting point, but you cannot add your own custom properties to this node type. And also you can't really export out of EDM nodes that belong to this node type. It really is meant for a very purpose-built use case to map your legacy chart of accounts to your enterprise, your new chart of accounts. So as long as you keep these caveats, these restrictions in mind, this could be a really effective solution to manage, like to handle a chart of accounts conversion. So you're going from ground to cloud and redesigning your chart of accounts. This can be a great solution to do that as long as you kind of work within the constraints of the properties provided. And here's a quick shot of a node type created that references that specialty node type class called Legacy GL. And then here's an example of the properties that come with that node type. And then related value sets, well, I guess I should say these are some other things that I see cropping up more and more. So related value sets is a kind of a concept in Cloud ERP where you can essentially, as you are doing data entry in Cloud ERP, as you select, say, an account or a cost center, you can have the remaining segment dropdowns kind of filter based on the selection of a prior value in the ERP. And really, it's kind of like a smart filter, a dependent filter, and you can maintain those in EDM. And I have a screenshot on the next slide to show you that. So not all of my ERP clients are using related value sets, but if a client is heavily using that, I would definitely look into this because it's a mapping in a way. You're just kind of saying based on this account or entity or whatever the primary segment value is, I only want these dependent segment values to be displayed. So if I pick entity A, I only want cost centers 1, 2, 3, and 4 to be selectable within ERP, and you're controlling those relationships, those intersections inside EDM. Cross-validation combination sets is a fairly newish feature that I've kind of dabbled in but haven't fully implemented. But it's kind of like a cross-validation rule, but simplified in that it'll only go up to 5 segments, but it's a way where EDM could manage those valid combinations and then produce a file that gets exported to Cloud ERP and ingested, and it would help drive some of the rules inside ERP to make sure people do not select an invalid code combination as they're doing their data entry. Sometimes the need for this can be lessened or reduced by doing more on the related value sets up front, so you're not even letting somebody select an invalid value to begin with. But if you're not using RVS, this could be a way to still provide some of those controls so that people don't select an invalid code combination. And then finally, the cross-validation rules is a tricky one because you can end up, depending on the ERP, you could be talking many segments. You could be talking 10, 12, 14 segments or more. So it could get really complex in EDM, but it is doable. And I have seen others kind of take some approaches by doing like some hierarchies with um, kind of a parent-child relationship in a way that kind of provides a filter or an intersection. Think of it as like a where clause of a SQL statement, where you can kind of, through a hierarchy, define the valid selections based on a primary selection, kind of like an RVS does, and then produce a file in a certain format for ingestion by ERP. So it's doable, but it does take a bit more effort. Um, last last slide on the mapping topic. Here's just an example of related value sets. So this is a case where we have these accounts kind of as the parents, and then the related cost centers that are valid for those accounts. So you're kind of maintaining the structure in EDM. And you already have the individual segment values and hierarchies in the EDM already. So it's a matter of just kind of pulling that together in kind of a dedicated viewpoint inside EDM. And then when this is pushed out and ingested by ERP, it's basically going to say if they select this account, it's only going to present these 5 cost centers in the user interface screen of ERP for them to select with. So kind of an interesting idea. Again, leveraging extracts to make sure you produce that file in the valid format for consumption by ERP. All right, so kind of changing direction a little bit, using EDM as a COA accelerator. So one thing we've noticed over the years, especially as clients go kind of ground to cloud, go from either EBS or PeopleSoft or some non-Oracle ERP to Oracle Cloud ERP, we notice they often struggle with just the data conversion. Like, how do I get my trial balances, all of my historical balances easily migrated and validated and reconciled and put into Cloud ERP? So kind of what we've come up with on this accelerator is a way to expedite that process, and EDM is really a key component of it. So I'll just quickly walk through a couple of these slides to give you a flavor of what EDM can do here. To further set the background, what we like to do is when we talk to clients is think about this reporting pyramid. So I won't go through all the words on this slide. It's a little busy, but it kind of gives you the idea about kind of going from more granular detail to more financial and strategic and analytical summary level information as you go up the pyramid. We also kind of think of coupling both the financial side of it with the operational side. So on the financial side, you're thinking about how am I mapping my chart of accounts in my local or legacy ERPs into my corporate ERP? And then how is that going to integrate with my EPM applications like FCCS and my planning applications or strategic modeling and things like that? And then finally moving up to the analytical layer for reporting. And in parallel, on the operational side, you'll have operational systems that need to be kind of mapped somehow into more of your enterprise operational systems. And then you get into more of the higher level operational metrics and analysis that you need to do. So when you think about this perspective of financial, operational, kind of going from detailed granularity to more summary, analytical, strategic level, this is where EDM can help. And we kind of came up with this four-step process where, depending on where the client is at, sometimes they're at step one, sometimes they're already at step three. But no matter where you're at, we can kind of step in, help you define or refine your chart of accounts based on where you're at in your journey, help to get that finalized, and then leverage EDM and EPM to really start to transform those historical balances, handle those mappings, handle those new chart of account hierarchies, so that you can really, in a more efficient and rapid fashion, get to the cloud ERP. So EDM usually kind of starts to step in the middle of this staircase, depending on where the client is at. But as we start to go from more of the abstract theoretical into more of the physical and implementation side of it, that's where EDM can really step in. So um, this is a interesting diagram that Mike Colleen, who heads our EPM practice, put together. It kind of shows you how this all fits together. So you think about, in terms of reporting, obviously you'll have your legacy ERPs that are producing your typical legacy financial statements. But now you're going to a new ERP that will have its own financial statement. So you really need that reporting strategy to tie it together. And that's where the previous slide of that four-step staircase, along with the reporting pyramid, kind of starts to pull it all together. So what we work with you on is to start to define that new chart of accounts. I've actually had some clients try to do this all offline through Excel and other tools, and then only bring in EDM after the chart of accounts was finalized. But really, the earlier you can bring EDM, the better, because EDM can handle both the old and the new and kind of display things side by side and kind of let you visually align, compare, and map your old COA to your new COA as you go through that journey. So you don't have to wait for your new chart of accounts to be finalized to really bring in EDM. EDM can help you get to that point in the first place. So this is kind of where EDM starts to step in, where we load up that new chart of account, and then we can start to analyze that, validate it. Again, using all the visual interactive aspects of EDM, you start to see what your chart of account is looking like. The end state will be to push that to the ERP into the underlying Essbase cube. But it's in the middle here is where clients often struggle, because it's kind of an iterative back and forth process that's hard to do with ERP. So what we can do is position a free-form planning application kind of in the middle. And really, that allows you to leverage EDM, data exchange or data management, and more of an iterative approach, so that you're loading up the mappings, you're loading up the new hierarchy, you're loading the data, and then you can do the reporting directly out of the free-form planning app to kind of see how is your data looking? How are the balances coming across? Are they balancing out? Are they reconciling to what you want it to be? And do this in a very iterative fashion, instead of always kind of going back and trying to pull out what you loaded to ERP, which is not easy, and then do it again. This allows for a more flexible, iterative approach to really refine your chart of accounts, your hierarchies, and your mappings, with EDM as kind of the foundation. Constantly tweak it, push it to EPM planning, review the results, tweak it, and kind of go through this over and over. And the end result is, once this is pretty well set, now you have the mappings at a state and the hierarchies at a state where you can really publish those to Cloud ERP, and you're good to go. So it's just kind of a way to help clients get to this end result more quickly. All right, one more topic, and then try to take any questions. Um, Non-financial use cases. So this is a big thing I've been trying to communicate to clients over the past couple of years is that with the new capabilities and the innovation I see in EDM, there is so much more that EDM can be used for beyond the traditional financial chart of accounts. So one example is this, and this was a proof of concept that we did with a client earlier in the year around spend authority management. So really, if you think about, any organization, you'll have some kind of a CapEx or OpEx procurement process where people need um, to buy something, and you need that to go through the proper approvals, and then based on the price, you need to make sure that the right level of authorities are reviewing and approving those expenditures based on the dollar amount. And so what we were able to do is kind of leverage EDM as a way to maintain those spending tiers, if you will. So it really was a collection of tables in EDM that really contain, and I have a visual on the next slide that hopefully make it more clear, but think of EDM as kind of a spend authority hub where it contains the employees, um, all the employees, including the directors, the vice presidents, the executives, all of their spending thresholds, like what is the range of expenses that they are allowed to approve expenses for. All that maintained within EDM, plus leveraging all the request and the data governance features inside EDM to kind of manage those thresholds, because there's always delegation that needs to happen. If somebody's out of the office, you need somebody else to step in and temporarily approve those expenditures. So really that engine was happening inside EDM, and out of EDM, we were producing files that could be loaded to an external procurement system like Ariba or Concur or something of that nature. So what we ended up doing, we explored the user adapter in EDM, which is kind of another special purpose EDM adapter that comes out of the box. That didn't really meet the need here. We explored it because we needed to load up a lot of employees in EDM, and we thought we could take advantage of this adapter to do that. But we needed to add so many custom properties. We ended up just going directly to an application built on the universal adapter so that we could do this kind of customized use case. So this hopefully will explain it a little better than what I just said. So if you think of this left to right, we're taking a feed from an HCM system. It could be a Workday or anything like that, of all the employee information. So you think about the employee ID, the name, the title, their level, et cetera. All that is imported into kind of a staging employee detail layer of EDM, and then subscribes into kind of the master spend authority table. And that's where we really link the employees to the different spending thresholds. And a lot of those thresholds were supported by reference tables or lookup sets inside EDM. We could also have used like reference dimensions, but think of it as a way to abstract out the ranges of spending authority for different levels of executives. Instead of kind of hard coding it in a way into this master, we can just reference, a given employee has spend authority two, and that spend authority two and the lookup set would contain the minimum and maximum dollar amount that that person has authority for. And then on this side is for the delegation. So, as somebody was going to be away or out of the office, they needed the ability to kind of temporarily override those spend authority levels. So we have kind of a parallel table here where people could say, I need to replace this authority, this person with a temporary person. And then that through a subscription would go back and kind of overwrite on a temporary basis the spend authority master. So it's kind of a kind of a cool use case of EDM, totally non-financial. It really had nothing to do with the chart of accounts. But out of that, we were able to produce files, and we prototyped one that could be loaded into Ariba, I believe it was. So again, just trying to demonstrate the flexibility of EDM in both ingesting from an HCM system, doing some clever things with mapping tables and lookup tables inside EDM, and then producing a file of a specific format. And this format here was actually fairly complicated. We had to use generational extracts and do some other interesting filtering to get the file out of EDM to come out in the format needed for the target. The next one is just some other things I've noticed, and I've mentioned these to many clients, but it's just, again, ways to, I wouldn't say this is the only reason or the primary reason to use EDM, but it certainly is a useful extension of EDM if you already have it in place. So, for example, we have one client that needed to maintain a complete list of primary and secondary owners of every hierarchy, along with primary and secondary owners of every property. And so we are actually able to set up kind of a reference dimension inside EDM that really maintained all that for them. And the advantage of having it in EDM is, first of all, it's centralized. Then you can control who has access to it. You have the audit capabilities of EDM to see who changed it, and then you can easily extract or download the detail if you need to provide a report to the auditors, for example. So again, not a primary reason to buy EDM or use EDM, but certainly a natural extension of EDM to use it as a data dictionary of sorts to maintain some key information that your business may require. The other interesting one is on COA definitions. So you could definitely leverage EDM to kind of store your chart of account policies and definitions and guidelines. So kind of like, what is the business purpose for each of your GL accounts, for example? What are some guidelines or parameters or exceptions on how the different chart of account values are used? Again, it's just data, but it's reference data. So why not put it in EDM, and you get the benefits of the easy access, the visual aspects of EDM, the auditing, and the ability to download or extract it. And then beyond the topic of this webinar, but in 2410, and then they just enhanced this feature in 2412, but Oracle was really investing heavily in expanding EDM into more of the operational use cases. So what they are doing is actually kind of building matching rules and kind of a data matching workbench inside EDM. So the idea is that you would be able to load into EDM something like a supplier master or a location master. And EDM has the abilities to define rules and matching thresholds to kind of identify, say, duplicate suppliers. I may have 5 suppliers coming in that really are the same as one existing supplier record that I already have. And you can define these matching rules in EDM to point that out and say, okay, you have these five records, but they really are the same thing based on some of the pattern matching and the fuzzy logic you can define in these matching rules to handle that. So a completely new world of EDM. So we're starting to explore this with a couple of clients. But it's just an interesting use case, really completely getting out of the traditional financial chart of accounts where you're actually leveraging EDM to kind of do deduplication and matching and cleansing of operational data stores around suppliers or products or locations. So I'll stop there. And then my last slide, again, I hope some of this maybe gave you some ideas or some interest in EDM. But my key takeaways, if you don't remember anything else, is just keep in mind the flexibility of EDM to handle all these different use cases, whether it's mappings as part of that chart of accounts kind of accelerator process to go to the cloud, or just some of those non-financial use cases. There is so much flexibility in EDM now to handle those different use cases. EDM being agnostic, so don't think that EDM can only work or help you if you're talking about an Oracle target. We can definitely do it outside of the Oracle ecosystem. And then finally, EDM is really just a full enterprise data solution. So you don't have to use it just for your financial chart of accounts. Really, if you have any type of reference data, enterprise data, anything that you just want to control and govern and have the audit capabilities and all the other collaborative capabilities of EDM, it's a great option to manage that and maybe get out of some of the spreadsheets and files on SharePoint and all the stuff that I see clients doing. All right, so with that, that is all I had. So I will see if there are any questions.
Um, Looks like there is one so far. So is there a governance or workflow to request, review, approve, or decline master data changes, like requesting a new account or a business unit?
Good question. Yeah, and yes, there is. So there's a kind of a two-part answer to that. So there's a built-in mechanism called a request in EDM. So to affect any change to a hierarchy, whether it's an account, a business unit, a department, you have to create a request, apply those changes, and submit the request. So there's some built-in controls right there. And then what we often do with clients is we will add an approval policy layer on top of that request mechanism. So when they submit the request, instead of it being automatically approved, it will be routed through a series of approvers. And you can do all kinds of things with those approval workflows. We can have them conditionally fire based on certain conditions. We can chain approval workflows together. So you could have one set of people approve, say, a change to a balance sheet account, and a different set of people approve a P&L account change. So lots of ways to do parallel sequential approvals. There's escalations. There's a pushback capability where if an approver receives a request and they're not quite sure they understand the purpose, they can push it back inside EDM to the original submitter to say, please take some action or clarify why you need this change. So yes, the short answer is there's built-in data governance and then really the approval policy. You can set those up for anything, and you can make those as elaborate or as simple as you want. Yeah, and I see your next question, David. Yes. So what's interesting with EDM, EDM doesn't really have like a separate form interface. It really is you're kind of interacting with the hierarchy itself. But what we often do is we'll either position like a kind of a front end data governance application, a master application in EDM of some sort, or some kind of a simplified viewpoint. And we do things like that. So through properties, and then you can also put tooltips in each of the properties to kind of put in the question, and you can have those required. So that's where we do things like requiring, like what is the purpose or definition of this account? Will this BU contain headcount, or will this cost center have a certain threshold of expenses in the coming year? So those can be handled through properties in EDM in a very simplified interface. We can make those required or optional based on the situation. You can put tooltips to kind of explain to the user what those properties are for. You can add attachments to the request. So if they're supporting documents or spreadsheets or email messages, you can do that within EDM. So yes, you can definitely do that. The data governance tool, I'm not sure if I totally understand, but the idea with EDM is a given EDM environment will contain multiple applications, or I like to think of them as containers that are kind of purpose built for a specific target system. So what sometimes we will do is either stand up more of a front end data governance application, or we may extend maybe like a EDM ERP application to handle kind of that upfront data governance. But either way is valid. But what you want to do is really present that really clean viewpoint to the user. You don't want them to have to fill in information that they would not know or should not know, but you want to make sure you capture enough of the key information, the justification, some of those key properties, like you mentioned with, will it have headcount, or what's the thresholds for expenses, those key things that would help the approver make a decision as to whether to approve that request or not. That's really what you want to capture up front. Yeah, so it's all done. It's all done in EDM. Again, there isn't a form, but it's a separate application. Everything you do in EDM, you're interacting with either a hierarchy or a list of values through a very intuitive interface that shows kind of the hierarchy or values in the middle with all the attributes and properties on the right side. And then everything you do is interact through that. So it's kind of like a form in the sense that it's a simplified view of a hierarchy where you're capturing the key information required. All right, any other questions?
It looks like, excuse me, looks like that may be all the questions for now. But of course, if anyone has questions that arise after the webinar, you are free to shoot those over to either Kevin or myself. And I'll make sure if you shoot them to me, then I'll get them to Kevin. Thank everyone for being here today. Thank you, Kevin, for being here to present. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, everyone with an individual or a corporate membership will have access to this recording later today. So with that being said, I thank everyone for being here, and we'll give you back a little bit of time.
All right, thanks everybody.